The Chinese film Wolf Warrior 2 became the biggest grossing film ever at the Chinese box office after taking $571 million in 14 days. Why has this film achieved such great success? Many Chinese moviegoers say they were touched by Wolf Warrior 2's patriotic plot, yet the BBC calls the film a nationalist action film. Does the West have a bias against Chinese patriotism? In 2015, China's Navy evacuated citizens and foreigners from Yemen's southern port of Aden amid fierce fighting there. As more Chinese companies and people go overseas, what challenges are facing China's consular protection? China is speeding up its military buildup and has become a major contributor to UN peacekeeping operations. What role will China's army play globally?
There's no question about the huge commercial success of Wolf Warrior 2. However, I'm afraid the box office has built enormous pressure and expectation on the PRA armed forces, because next time, if the Chinese were held hostage anytime, any place, our army would be expected to reach and come to their rescue. And that would be unrealistic in terms of international law, or whether they're going to be authorized by the UN Security Council. So what do you think of the pressure coming from or arising from nationalism on this occasion?
Well, based on my homework, the captain of the battleship who went to the Libya rescue in 2011, he said that the movie does not accurately reflect how swift the battleship could be able to respond if the situation were real. So that means the real scenario, the real battleship, will be in much better and swifter condition in response to any land disputes or conflict, or if the Chinese workers or civilians in a particular country are facing life-threatening danger.
But given the huge repercussions and impact of the box office, the Wolf Warrior 2, ironically, blue helmet troops from PRA armed forces who are now deployed in Libya haven't been able to see the movie, and they call for Wu Jing to send them a copy.
Oh, that's interesting.
To have a real taste of what they are doing in Libya, where the massive evacuation of Chinese nationals occurred back in 2011. What do you think of the driving force behind the commercial success of Warrior?
Well, there are several elements. So far as I can recall, first thing first is 天时地利, the timing.
Yes.
For example, this is the summer vacation. This is the summer blackout season. This is basically the Chinese Film Protection Month,
Yes.
and that's why this film can sail through into this Chinese.
And
film
above all,
market.
this is a time to celebrate the 90th anniversary of
Yes.
the PLA
And it coincides, right, with the
Army's
90th
Day on
anniversary.
August the 1st.
That's
Yeah,
right. And
good
thirdly,
timing.
I would also say that this is basically coincides with the fact that China is rising and China's interest overseas. It needs to be protected, and our citizens around the world needs to be protected.
Look at the
Yeah.
Hollywood blockbuster of Black Hawk Down, in which American Marines were portrayed as victims of the local hostility
Yeah.
in Mogadishu, Somalia, in the early 1990s. That was a very bad story for the image of Americans who were defeated by the local militias. Quite against this backdrop, ironically, the Chinese
Right.
and the lonely warrior, the lonely wolf, has been portrayed as a very brave soldier,
That's
like Saving Private Ryan. So what do you think of the theme of patriotism and the issue of bravery itself? Is it the James Bond of the Chinese equivalent?
No, it's not. I'm strongly against the idea that Wu Jing is portrayed as a 00 kind of hero out there saving the Africans from a potential threat. No, it's all about China using its power for humanitarian influence. This is all about a humanitarian crisis out there in Africa. A Chinese lone ranger is sent there to protect not the Chinese workers, but also African soldiers. And we are not.
But
Like-
all James
unlike-
Bond movies and Hollywood movies have humanistic justice reasons.
No, I think the James Bond is all about blatant killing out there in Africa.
Well, there's a lot of
this
blatant
individual.
killing and human butchery in this movie as well.
Well, it's all against the baddies. Well, China has a traditional philosophy.
That's the
that
problem.
War
The
is justified.
melodramatic rendition of your enemies.
If you kill the baddies,
They are
right?
they are hot bloods. They are irrational, and they are just machine-like killers.
Look at the warlord in this war zone. He's an African, by the way. He's portrayed as someone who wants to protect the Chinese, who asked the European mercenaries to stop killing the Chinese, and he was killed by the mercenary leader.
Well,
and therefore, the image of Africans does deserve our discussion here about.
But the only
and
reason.
you're right. The Africans they have developed a deep, profound feeling for the Chinese.
Yeah.
The Chinese proved very popular.
I mean, throughout
despite
the movie,
our alleged pollution of the environment and poor employment of the local workers, so on and so forth, controversial issues surrounding the Chinese business presence there. But the Chinese are said to be very popular with the locals.
Yeah, we are different because we are different. And back to your Black Hawk Down leitmotif. I mean, in Black Hawk Down, it's all about this American elite forces intervening and try to arrest this local warlord by a very imperialistic policy. China is not. China is not about rescuing, intervening, but China is all about rescuing because our interest is threatened. Our life is threatened. And in this case, it's a Lone Ranger, yes, but then it's all about saving lives, not about, unlike Black Hawk Down, and which that Black Hawk should be down because it is interventionist, it's imperialistic.
Saved lives,
Yes.
and yet the failure of the military operation in Mogadishu, Somalia, in the Hollywood blockbuster of Black Hawk, failed to save any of the locals.
Right.
That resulted in massive, devastating massacre of up to
Humanitarian
900,000 people in Rwanda in 1994. And that's a horrific event, traumatic experience with an African country, despite the very successful post-war reconstruction in that country. So what do you think of the theme of patriotism? Do you think this is the Wolf Warrior 2 is actually a copycat of a Hollywood blockbuster, or we have walked our own path?
Well, I think to a certain extent, the movie has demonstrated a kind of lack of historical memory of China's presence, a long time and friendly, peaceful, cooperative presence in Africa. So I'm really worried that this movie is, by showing this macho hyper-masculinity and also this new rise of China's power, they are not distinguishing the difference between imperialism and the peaceful international presence. So if you highlight the necessity of flexing your muscles and showing your hyper-masculinity, then you're thinking that, okay, if my citizens are offended in a foreign country, we have the power to barge in and we have the power to claim our justice. But you're forgetting that you're doing that in a foreign country. That's very different when you're defending yourself in your homeland. So I think that distinction has to be made.
Or Leng Feng, the protagonist in the movie, appeared in a war zone, beset and plagued by hostilities from different militias, right? Like government forces and the rebel forces. So Wu Jing or Leng Feng was not supposed to be involved in any of the hostilities between these two groups. His mission was to save Chinese nationals without being assisted by Chinese patrolling flotilla in the Somali waters.
That's a very major distinction.
He was not asked to be
between
armed
Hollywood
by any
film,
firearms.
Yeah, and in Hollywood films, all the military missions have to stick to its goal, and the Hollywood films make the missions successfully accomplishing its goal.
I'm surprised. I'm so surprised. Look at Black Hawk Down. It's a shameful failure. It's a shameful defeat. They are defeated by the local warlords. They didn't accomplish their role because they're imperialistic. China is different.
But look at this
movie. Leng Feng is different. Leng Feng is so very different. We are not imperialistic. Leng Feng doesn't belong to
His
Chinese
mission
army.
was
Listen
to rescue
let me finish what I said.
the Chinese doctor.
Let's do it. Let's
but
do it
the Chinese doctor was killed on the site.
Let me finish. Leng Feng reacts to this crisis in a non-PLA status. He's not a PLA soldier. He's discharged because of that mistake. He's a civilian.
But he was
the,
entrusted with the task
That's
of
right.
being
But
the
then,
lone wolf.
once again, it's not official commission. It's not authorized by the Chinese government, not by the United Nations. He's acting all by himself. And so that's why we see an individual heroism out there, and then act on the collective Chinese psyche, which I call patriotism.
Well,
because you protect your own people. What's wrong with protecting your own people?
Right. Well, it's one thing to protect your own people in your home country. It's another thing to protect your home people.
No, it's a different context.
In a different continent, in different
Right.
country.
Right now, Jindong, I think it's a
That's why
different context.
China always emphasizes the right of extraterritoriality.
Right,
You
because-
can't pretend that, okay, it doesn't matter whose country, whose land it is. Well, as long as my people are offended, then I'm going there, I'm going to claim my justice.
Well, as long as Leng Feng doesn't represent a certain authority, he represents humanity.
I know,
And humanity,
yeah.
let me finish. Humanity means that you must act in time of crisis. If life is taken, you respond. And this is a true universal kind of a convention that you save life in times of crisis, and that's why Leng Feng is seen as a hero saving lives. Let's separate this person from any other ideological kind of consumerism, ideological kind of conventions. Let's see this person as an individual who exercises humanity, saving lives, without, in a sense, without protecting his own life by sacrificing. And that's what I see as the true value of this very character, even though it's kind of a thin.
But I'm afraid
character
one haunting specter
Yes.
that may deliver unexpected repercussions about the success of Wolf Warrior 2 is the military missions, which are supposed to be peacekeeping, will be transformed into overseas military adventurism. If so many Chinese tourists whose number was put at 120 million last year would become a soft target of terrorist attacks. Now, what would happen to the Blue Water Navy, limited in size, this flotilla that patrols Somali waters for the escorting of international vessels would have to do more.
Yeah.
But the issue is whether they're going to be authorized in time by the UN Security Council.
Well, first thing first, I think that was a very, very interesting assumption. I think that you are presumptuous in terms of saying, well, there are so many Chinese overseas, and then we need to respond every single time when there is a crisis. I think China as a nation always act in a peaceful and harmonious manner around the world by complying with international laws, and which is why the Chinese nationals has very rarely been attacked in countries around the world. And Somali, Yemen are very, very rare cases at this very point. I think what is so very fictitious about this film is that Leng Feng seized upon this very opportunity. I see him sometimes as a kind of opportunistic, because he seized upon one individual event and tried to play out and enlarge and blow this whole thing out of proportion.
Yeah,
Thank you so
I
much.
think,
You are watching Dialogue with Jin Zhao and Jimeng. We're discussing the huge commercial success and big impact of a recent box office, The Wolf Warrior 2, which is said to be the Chinese copycat of a Hollywood blockbuster action movie, and focusing on the issue of patriotism as well. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. Look at Leng Feng, who privately funded the movie, and I believe he must have been gleeful, very cheerful about the windfall profits. Now it's likely to reach a ceiling of at least, 4 billion RMB. That's a lot. That's a really big surprise for a lot of the movie investors who are jealous of his big success. Do you think this is likely to become a business pattern? Why do you think Wu Jing ran such a high risk in making his own personal investment?
Well, Chinese cinema industry is really unpredictable, because we all know that the last year the box office record went to a movie which was a Chinese rendition of the Anderson brothers' Little Mermaid. The film was produced by a Hong Kong director. So if you say this is a very swing of taste by Chinese moviegoers from Little Mermaid all of a sudden to Wolf Warrior 2. So who knows what is the next? Maybe the next one is a science fiction movie or a family drama.
Yes, indeed, tastes of our diversified audiences could really be compared to easy shifts in loose sand. You cannot predict precisely what will be the next huge blockbuster in the Chinese movie industry or the cinemas. So what do you think of the basic elements of the success?
Well, let me see. First thing first, I think there must be a star in the film. The star system play a key role in this very film.
But there's no big star in Wolf Warrior 2.
To me, I think that Wu Jing has always been a kind of ignored star. Actually, he is the classmate of Jet Li back in the martial arts school here in Beijing, and he went to Hong Kong and started a career out there in Hong Kong and had been very successful, in fact, out there in Hong Kong. But then he went back to Beijing and went back to China as an author, director, and also scriptwriter. Secondly, I think there must be a good story. Wu Jing has been actually maturing over the years in terms of producing military-themed films because he himself actually had a military background. And thirdly, I would say the market. The market now is ripe for the kind of adventurous and also patriotic themed film in correspondence with China's rise and China's rise as a power.
Jima, I appreciate your clear articulation of those fantastic points concerning the success of Wolf Warrior 2. However, in the very first chapter of the movie, we were surprised by the killing of a local mafia head. He demanded a coercive dismantling of property, and that drew attention of the servicemen, and one of them was Leng Feng, who killed the guy who threatened with a pistol. Who threatened his life with a pistol. But it seemed this ex-soldier was punished controversially. However, we got a strong feeling that the punishment of Leng Feng, the ex-soldier, didn't follow precisely and strictly the procedure justice. He was only put under house arrest, it seemed to me, for a few days, and then he was released and he was sent to Africa for a special mission to avenge. So what do you think of this part about the vulnerability? Was it a good story?
Well,
it is. I think it is.
Can I give it a try? Well, I think I'm glad you mentioned that because he went to his former pal's hometown to deliver the bad news that his pal was killed, right, in the military combat. So he went there, and in the civilian circumstance in China, he was ganged up by a lot of local, we call them hooligans.
Local thugs. Yes.
Local thugs.
thugs.
So he killed the head of the thug. Well, I think that point is to show that his masculinity is in crisis in normal circumstances, in conventional Chinese structure. So
you mean his life being threatened, right?
His masculinity.
Yes.
Because he's supposed to be, he's talented, he's very capable, he's supposed to have very fast track promotion, but he is not so self-disciplined. So he despises systematic.
How is his life threatened? Did you remember the detail?
No, his own life was not threatened.
You mean Leng Feng was held at gunpoint by a head of the thugs?
No, the thug threatened that after they leave, they will kill the whole family of his deceased pal.
That's bluff.
So
that is a bluff.
That's bluffing.
So he mercilessly killed the guy on spot.
We don't know. Did he kill the guy?
He shows that his masculinity is not so popular, cannot make him really far in peacetime and in regular conventional social structure. So who took away his hyper-masculinity? The conventional, the regular
Timo, you've got to be very
system.
careful because the Jindal represents feminism and the representation of women's
nothing feminist over here.
You set the stage for a good discussion about the
his
feminism
masculinity,
as opposed to
masculinity.
His his hyper masculinity has to be restored through what? In unconventional circumstances. So to a certain extent, Leng Feng, he brings the war to himself to re-establish his hyper masculinity. And very ironically, he is capable of the traditional Chinese style of hyper masculinity, which is the martial art body. But he, in order to please an international audience, he has to pick up this modern white supremacy defined masculine body, so that he wants to demonstrate that physically, mentally, and in terms of the use of modern equipment, I'm as compatible as you are.
Wu Jing comes across as a villain, bad guy, but he.
No, thank you very much.
No.
Is he a good guy or a bad guy?
Thank you very much for this.
Is he a good guy or bad guy?
No.
He's a good guy. He's a super good guy.
So he
He's a
eventually
superhero.
wins the heart of this Chinese
The hearts and
American
minds.
movie to a Chinese American woman. It's not a Chinese woman. It's not a white American woman, but it's a Chinese American woman.
Now,
He wins the
let's go
heart
back to
of
the
this
first
Chinese
the
American
opening,
woman. That way, he reclaims his masculinity. His masculinity is now is
The
safe.
masculinity was used to protect the disadvantaged social group,
Yeah,
right?
right.
The
vulnerable
mother,
group.
the mother, and the widow.
That's
of the
masculinity
victim.
is defined. Masculinity is
justified.
defined
And
by
it's
man
good
being the
masculinity.
protector.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a good
justified because he kills the bad
masculinity,
guy.
not bad
The guy who
masculinity.
threatened his life with the pistol. Right,
Well,
with the pistol.
Every
Right at the be-
masculinity
right behind his
needs
neck.
its justification. You can easily find masculinity in justification.
No,
Yeah.
simply put, I mean, back to your story. Let me, can I? Yes. Simply put, I think Leng Feng his life is threatened by this local thug with the gun pointing at the back of his neck, and then he responded first thing first, very in a reasonable way, and then the guy rose up because the police is out there, and then he thought that he has backup troops out there, and so he begins to attack Leng Feng again. At least he threatens to attack Leng Feng again, and Leng Feng respond by first thing first, by dissecting the pistol, right, and then throw the pistol away, kick him in the chest, and we don't know he kills him or not. But then the consequences is, as a soldier, he's court-martialed, he's jailed, he's not under house arrest. I watched the film 3 times. He's jailed, he's court-martialed and jailed, and then discharged with very, very bad honor. And so he's no longer the warrior, even though he claimed, once a warrior, always a warrior. No, he's not. And that's why, that was a demarcation line, that this character is no longer the soldier, no longer the kind of a government-backed up mercenary or some sort. He's acting all on himself. In fact, he goes to Africa to avenge his girlfriend.
It's
to
very much
avenge
like
his girlfriend's
a Hollywood
death.
movie on the western frontier, saving a beautiful lady.
Yeah, right.
Like Gary Hart. Do you think movie makers should be clearly aware of the world attention about the image of China? Whatever we do, be it benevolent in protection of our soft targets, consular protection of our soft targets or not, we are always described as a threat.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I think there's always a kind of international effort, almost like conspiracy effort, in terms of demonizing China and demonizing a rising China when it sets out to protect our interests overseas, and especially by historical rights, the South China Sea.
In this context, I'm afraid the issue of patriotism could be portrayed as very negative, and the peaceful rise itself would be called into question, right?
Well, I echo Jin Zhao's cautious response towards the idea of China's rise as a nationalistic or perhaps jingoistic nationalistic power. And I'm sure that this is something that we should guard against. But then back again, if we look at Chinese philosophical roots, I think Confucius has been always very, in a sense, wise in holding out prospects and visions for a rising China. I was actually helping a gentleman out there making a speech in Washington, D.C. during the Grand Summit, Grand Challenges Summit over there. And we all agree that the Confucius notion of 天下, the all under heaven, we need to work For all people, all under heaven, we need to provide our service. It's not about, say, freedom of navigation out there in South China Sea. I think China has contributed tremendously out there in the South China Sea in offering services, marine services, and Indian Ocean. Our sea route actually not just guarantee the safety of China's transport of oil, petroleum into China, but also we're doing trade. Like Zheng He's voyage out there to the South China Sea and Indian Ocean, we're providing services, offering public products, and like Bangladesh, like Sri Lanka, these are countries that we have been taking care of.
Well, the next sexy issue is about the love story. Now, patriotism is your profound love for the country, for the motherland. What about that beautiful lady who was so grateful for Leng Feng's protection and rescue efforts? Upon hearing that the girlfriend of Leng Feng may have been killed in the abduction operation, Leng Feng exercised utmost restraint and didn't show his love for that beautiful lady. And a lot of the moviegoers said, hey, come on, he's not a real man, he's not a real guy. So what do you think of a better solution to this part of the story, the love story itself?
Well, I hope I was wooing himself. I think that there is a scenario I can imagine. I think once again,
I'm not satisfied with the rendition of the women characters, and what I hate the most is in the movie is this one line that says, "Oh, we love Africa so much." This was the conversation between these two veteran army officers, the one who is the security guard of this Chinese plant, and Leng Feng. So this older, retired army officer who used to work for PLA, now the security guard, he said, "Oh, who does not love Africa? Good food, beautiful scenery, and hot women."
That could be very sexist.
That's very sexist, and that's not. But actually, that is very pleasing to a lot of moviegoers.
It's pretty human and realistic. Therefore, it's not politically correct.
He is a retired PLA army officer, and he has been in Africa working for this Chinese factory, and all he was praising about Africa is good food, beautiful scenery, and hot women. Actually, hot women is a soft translation of what actually he said. He said, new day, meaning good sex. So that's very, very sexist.
And that's
from the mouth
very
of a
offensive
retired.
for women.
Very offensive.
Exactly. Thank you so much for being with us. I believe everybody is waiting for the release of Wolf Warrior 3, the follow-up chapter of this very successful Chinese blockbuster, an action movie. I thank you again for being with us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.